Hey Rockafire fans, today I want to go over something I've spent about the past year looking into and researching. When I first entered this fanbase about 6 years ago, I was very intrigued by the fact that the early Rockafire explosion appeared to have different masks than the masks used today. It also seemed like a daunting task to try to compile all the different mask versions the characters went through, so I didn't figure it out for a while. But about a year ago, I started to try to unlock the puzzle of this, and as it turns out, there aren't as many mask versions as I thought. I figured I would compile all my research into one video and really lay out all the different mask versions the Rockafire went through. So let's start out with Rolf. Rolf's first mask version was produced in 1980 and was sculpted by Dave Thomas. This mask looks pretty great in my opinion, but it definitely isn't as friendly as the later Rolf. He definitely has a more primitive and realistic look to him. This mask was actually used for a long time, with the last batch that used this mask being January 1982. This mask for the most part is long gone, but I have seen at least one collector who had one in his collection. The next mask is one that people are very familiar with. This is one of the standard versions of Rolf. This was sculpted in 1981 by Nancy, one of CEI's original artists, and the first batch it was used in was the April batch of 1982, directly after they stopped using the original Rolf version. This was part of Creative Engineering's efforts to soften the looks of the characters and make them friendlier. The last batch this was used in was the October batch of 1982, and even though this mask was followed by another version, it is actually still used today and can be seen on Aaron's show. The final Rolf mask is another mask people are pretty familiar with. It's very similar to the last mask. This was introduced in January of 1983, and I just call it Short Fang Rolf. This mask almost looks as though it might be the same as the previous, but with modified fangs, but this actually isn't the case, and this is proven by the fact that this actually requires an entirely different head fur with a different pattern, because the wrinkles on the forehead are in a different position. And this is why you may see a Rolf that has a long-fanged mask, but the head fur is covering up one of the wrinkles on the forehead, and that's because they're using the wrong head fur. It's actually using the short fang head fur. So this mask continued to be used and is still used today. It is technically the most current mask, and I'm afraid I don't know who sculpted it. So that's Rolf, and now on to Duke. So Duke, of course, has his original mask version that was introduced in 1980, sculpted by Dave Thomas. And this mask has heavy eyebrows and more of a dog-like snout. And I, as many others, do like this mask for its charm, but it is unsettling in some ways. This mask is similar to the original Rolf in that it was used for a long time, and the last batch it was used in was January of 1982, which is the same batch as the Rolf mask. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like any of these masks exist anywhere in private hands or collectors, but hopefully one does show up at some point. Next, we have the current Duke mask. This is another mask sculpted by Nancy in 1981. It first began use in the batch of April 1982. This mask is far friendlier looking than the original, so this is the mask you see on everyone's Duke, and there really aren't any other mask versions besides these two for Duke. Now with Fats, this is one that I was sort of concerned about because I thought his face was so intricate that I wouldn't be able to figure out how many mask versions he had, but I did figure it out. And again, Fats started out with his original mask version in 1980, and a fun fact about this mask is it actually requires a different head shell, because originally Fats' head was larger. And this was sculpted by Dave Thomas, and it's really a realistic gorilla mask. That has negatives to it, of course, because it scared a lot of people, but this mask has visible ears. The last batch that used this mask was the July 1981 batch, and also to note is that Bubba the Shakespeare reciting gorilla uses this mask. And I actually did see one of these sell on eBay about 5 years ago, so there is one out there. His next mask version was sculpted by Nancy in 1981. This mask began to be used in the batch of October 1981. He has sort of a smaller face, and this mask actually does have visible ears, but they're smaller, so it's a little bit harder to see. This is frequently the mask you'll see in promotional videos of Showbiz, and this was sort of getting closer to the friendly look that Creative Engineering was looking for, but this wasn't his final mask version. The last batch that used this mask was October of 1982, and I have seen one of these masks on a private collector's Fats. Finally, we have current Fats. This mask was introduced in the batch of January 1983. I am unsure who sculpted it. This mask is very friendly looking, but it still very much holds on to the original gorilla image, and pretty much all the masks you see today are this mask. Beach Bear's up next, and he's very interesting because he only has one mask version. And I know this may seem surprising, but Beach Bear's mask version never changed. From the very first Jacksonville location until now, on Aaron's show, that is the same mask version. It was sculpted by Dave Thomas in 1980. And although the Colander Telethon video shows a new Beach Bear being sculpted by Billy Bob Irvin, this was never finalized, and it was never used on any characters. So next, Mitzi. So with Mitzi, her original mask version was, again, sculpted by Dave Thomas in 1980, and this is really one of the creepiest looking Rockafire masks in my opinion. The worst one I've seen is the original Jacksonville mask, but after that they seem to kind of make her a little bit less creepy by painting her a little bit better and furring the mask differently. This mask was replaced at the same time as the original Fats mask, with the July 1981 batch being the last to use it. This is another situation like the original Duke, where unfortunately I've never seen one of these masks pop up, so it's fairly unlikely that one exists. Mitzi's second mask version is also the current version, which began to be used in the batch of October 1981, and this mask is far better in terms of looks than the original. Definitely a friendly look, and I'm unsure who sculpted this mask, but yes, all the masks you see today are this same one. Now, Billy Bob is interesting, and he is the most complex character when it comes to mask versions because he has 5. Let's start out with the first one, which was sculpted for the Hard Luck Bears Billy Wilbur by Dave Thomas in 1980. And you may say the Hard Luck Bears were made in 1979. This doesn't make any sense, but the Hard Luck Bears has some complex things surrounding it, including the fact that the Hard Luck Bears show has 2 mask versions. I won't get into that in this video because it's pretty complex and would take a long time to explain, but yes, Billy Wilbur had 2 mask versions, and Billy Bob shared the second mask version with it. So this mask was used for a very short period and stopped being used after about the first 18 shows, which was October 1980. This may have to do with the fact that he looks quite concerned with those heavy eyebrows. I really like this mask, and I know a lot of others do too, but he is the mascot, so I think they prioritize changing him and making him friendly. So I've never seen any of these masks out in the wild, and I think the only shot of one existing would be in a Hard Luck Bears show that still has one. Next, we have the main Billy Bob mask version everyone knows and loves, but there is a catch to this, and I'll explain that soon. So this mask version was sculpted sometime around late 1980, possibly early 1981 by Billy Bob Irvin, who Billy Bob is named after. And this is the main Showbiz mask version, and it began to be used in the batch of January 1981. I really like how this mask looks and think it's one of the best ones they ever produced. Now, there is a catch to this mask, and that is that it is not the one that is used currently. It may look extremely similar, but they are not the same mask, and I'm not sure exactly when this mask stopped being used, but it was sometime around 1994. And in my opinion, it seems like the only reason the mask stopped being used is because a mold went missing, perhaps the master mold, but this ties into the next mask version. So I'll talk about these next 2 mask versions together because during the 90s something strange happened with Billy Bob's mask. For whatever reason, a new Billy Bob was used in 1995, which is quite strange looking and does not at all look like the normal Showbiz Billy Bob. And this mask was used throughout the 90s at many venues. I think this is one of the worst masks Creative Engineering ever produced, but luckily its use was somewhat limited in that around 1997 it appears they stopped using it. And so that ties into the current mask version. So another mask version for Billy Bob was sculpted in the 1990s, sometime around 1994 to 95. And this mask almost passes off as being the same mask used during the Showbiz days, but it isn't. It is actually sculpted over the original Showbiz mask, so that explains a lot of it. But the nose is bigger, the tooth is thicker, the lip is more swollen looking. It's not quite as nice of a mask. Now, here's an interesting side note. There was another version of Billy Bob sculpted around 1981, and I call this mask Crow's Foot because of the wrinkles on the sides of the eyes. This mask was never used and actually can't even really be used because the mouth is far too shallow and the creases on the side of the face are non-existent, which leads the mask to be under a great amount of stress. It's a faulty design, and I assume that's why this mask was never officially used. However, during the 90s this mask was accidentally used a few times, such as in the Adventure Landing show, Tweetsy Railroad's original Billy Bob mask, Rockafire Pizza, and a hotel in Israel. But this quickly stopped, and all those masks developed almost immediate tears because of this faulty mask design. Looney Bird is the last main character to discuss. His first mask version is the same mask version used by Goonie Bird and the Hard Luck Bears. This mask was sculpted by Billy Bob in 1980. It was used very temporarily, maybe only for the first 2 batches. It has a wider looking beak that's slightly different than the next version, although they look pretty similar. They definitely stopped using this mask around the beginning of 1981, although I don't have an exact date. I have not seen any of these masks out there yet. Next is Looney Bird's second mask version, which I effectively call Short Beak Looney Bird, even though this mask is actually not shorter, but rather wider than the next one. The mouth lever used is the same. So this mask began use sometime around early 1981, and I would consider it an early mask version. It was likely sculpted by Billy Bob, although I can't confirm this 100%. The mask is far different than the current mask and looks crazier, perhaps more fitting for a drunken bird. I believe Billy Bob's Wonderland had one of these masks about 10 years ago, and this mask was used for a very long time, and the last batch that used it was January of 1983. Finally, we have current Looney Bird. This was sculpted by Nancy, and it was introduced in the May 1983 batch, so it was very late, and this was the second to last batch produced. This mask is a little bit more bird-like than the last and has a charm of its own, but I do prefer the previous mask more. This is the mask that everyone uses today, and it hasn't changed. A few extra things to note are prop characters. For example, the sun had an early mask version and a later mask version, but the moon never changed. Uncle Clunk had an original mask version that never made it into production, which had a stranger looking nose and chin. If you're really looking for a date to really sort of solidify when the Rockafire was standardized in terms of looks, I would really say the batch of April 1982. Although Fats and Looney Bird don't have their final masks, this is really when the show looked like what we think of the Rockafire as. And again, just in closing, this took me a lot of research over the past year and a lot of help from others figuring this all out. And if you guys are interested in more sort of historical videos like this, let me know.